Now, on a macroeconomic level, transport and logistics infrastructure provides access to consumer markets, connects raw materials to beneficiation markets, promotes regional integration, and ultimately improves connectivity to the global economy. On a microeconomic level, transport and logistics infrastructure has a direct impact on a country's handling capacity for imports and exports, distribution route development, distribution, and related services. All these factors together affect how competitive a company can be within a specific market. For more on the findings in this sector, we have Craig Parker, Senior Consulting Analyst at Frost & Sullivan, and he joins us from our Cape Town studio. Picking up on this report that Frost & Sullivan has produced, the most outstanding thing for me is that it seems as if when companies are making their projections as they expand outside of South Africa, they're not necessarily taking into consideration the state of logistics and infrastructure. Why would you think that such a big omission is often made?
Well, you need to take into account the logistics and infrastructure cost when it comes to transporting into Africa. We all know that the infrastructure is relatively poor, especially when we're looking at Central Africa. And South Africa is seen as a hub into Africa at the moment because the infrastructure at the moment, especially when trying to get into the landlocked countries in Africa, is relatively poor. We're seen as a safe haven. Financially, our financial markets are very secure. For countries to come and invest and set up shop in South Africa is a relatively safe option, and that's why they use South Africa to move up into the rest of Africa. But as you say, there are certainly issues when it comes to infrastructure development in Africa, and Africa is a lucrative marketplace at the moment, and that is why we contend that we need further research into specific economies in Africa. You need to do a deep dive into your specific region or country that you're interested to look in to actually assess what challenges there are and how those costs will impact your geographic expansion strategy into those various markets.
Well, outside of South Africa then, Craig, which obviously has the more developed infrastructure, what would you say of the state of transport, logistics and infrastructure in the broader region and in sub-Saharan Africa?
Right. South Africa itself actually ranks pretty high when we look at the logistics performance index, especially when it comes to infrastructure. We might think South Africa's infrastructure is poor, but it is relatively extremely advanced compared to what is out there in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. If we look at moving further north, especially closer to the equator, there are some definite challenges that need to be overcome, especially this time of year when consumer markets pick up, but it's also summertime. Rainfall is heavier, the roads become muddy. There is just not enough infrastructure development that has taken place in the past 20 years. When it comes to road infrastructure, the development has to take place on the long term, and if we look at your gross fixed capital formation that has gone into many of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, it's relatively poor in the past 20 to 30 years. We've seen a considerable decline, especially in the 90s. But the positive is that in the 2000s, and especially from 2005 onwards, a lot of policy changes have been made. A lot of governments have realized that infrastructure is the way forward. It's necessary. Intra-Africa trade between regions, even between countries that border each other in sub-Saharan Africa, is extremely poor. It's extremely low. We don't have the capability to actually transport goods between countries, and fortunately governments have realized this, and there's a strong drive towards improving infrastructure in the various regions.
Craig, so when another aspect of this conversation, which I think is really important that you've touched on in this report, is this concept of a middle class in Africa, upon which a lot of Africa's growth story is predicated. To what extent are we actually making the connection between middle class in terms of category and the actual spending power that this demographic has?
Yes, there are a few challenges when it comes to this. When the African Development Bank issued a report recently on the African middle class, they estimated that between 200 and 300 million Africans are living in a middle class, in the middle class. Now they based this on spending potential. We feel the definition of this was far too broad. It was based on spending between $2 and $20 a day. That is an extremely broad definition. When we're looking at middle class in Africa, we've got to look at what products you want to provide to the middle class. And if you want to classify someone as middle class, you are looking at someone who's not only spending, but actually living a middle class lifestyle. The reason I say you can't base this on spending alone or earning potential is the fact that things in Africa are generally more expensive. Durable goods are more expensive, transport costs are higher. You will be spending more on certain aspects of your lifestyle that people in developed economies might not be spending on. So for that reason, we feel that when we're looking at spending, we're looking between $10 and $20 a day is more realistic, because if we actually look at that level of spending on the continent, the group proportionately to total spenders has actually gone down in the past 10 years. We actually see the wealthy and those living between $2 and $4 a day actually driving consumption expenditure in Africa. The middle class, as we would like to think, based on living in a house with running water, for instance, with a television, a computer, the spending potential of that group proportionately to the rest has actually declined. So when we look at the potential of spending in Africa, companies have to consider the fact that it is driven by the wealthy and also by the class that is spending between $2 and $4 a day.